Our reporter Tom Edwards talking to Richard Keedwell from Yate. He spent almost 30 grand, his life savings, fighting a £100 speeding fine, and he's lost all the way along. We can talk to Nick Freeman, who's a specialist speeding lawyer from Freeman & Co. He's represented clients like Sir Alex Ferguson and David Beckham in the past. He's also known as Mr. Loophole. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Claire.
Hiya. What do you think about Richard's case there?
Well, I obviously sympathise with him. I'm afraid he's been ill-advised. He took advice initially from somebody who wasn't a lawyer, and he really is the author of his own misfortune in this case. It's quite clear from his report with your reporter that he didn't have any idea exactly how fast he was going. And what normally happens in cases such as this is you seek some expert legal advice, so you will be told for a nominal amount at an embryonic stage in the proceedings how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, and what your prospects of success are. Now, I believe Richard took some advice from a gentleman who apparently defended himself and won, and then thought he knew how to defend speeding cases, and that's how the ball started rolling. And what's happened here is Richard's adopted a very technical approach. He's tried to challenge the fact that these Home Office-approved devices aren't working properly by employing engineers, etc., etc. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that, but you need to be guided. You need to be guided by somebody who knows what he's doing. Lawyers operate basically on a fixed fee. Most lawyers operate on a fixed fee, and the fees are just stratospherically high. I mean, I've never heard of an amount approaching that. But for Richard to say, look, that the legal system stinks, I think is unfair. Because he simply doesn't understand it.
Okay.
When you go to court, first of all, he was offered a fixed penalty, so he could have had £100 and 3 points. It's clear he didn't know how fast he was going, and it's quite easily for one speed. If you're not sure, you're not concentrated particularly on your speedometer at that moment. But putting that on one side, you go to court, you plead not guilty. The court then has to have an administrative hearing to know what the issues are. And the issues in this case were incredibly complex because of the nature of his alleged defence. And they involved engineers, various experts, and the Crown have to call their experts. So I think there were about 3 administrative hearings that won't have taken very long at the Magistrates' Court. He then has his trial and he loses. Now, that shouldn't have cost that much money, but there does need to be those hearings so that when the court sits and listens to the trial, it knows in advance exactly what the issues are and is prepared to deal with them. Bearing in mind, they also have to allocate the appropriate amount of time to deal with each case. He lost the case, and as it is his right, he then went to the Crown Court and he pursued an appeal against conviction. Basically, history repeated itself and exactly the same thing happened. Had Richard sought the right advice from the outset, he would never have been in this situation. He might have been told, forget it, you're not going to win on this point.
Yeah.
There may have been various other points. He's basically taken a walk in the dark on a road that he's totally unfamiliar with, and he's been bitten badly on the way. And
basically, we think that we can fight the system, don't we? Can you fight the system?
Of course you can fight the system.
Well, you've done it, haven't you?
Well, because I'm a lawyer. I've spent nearly 40 years doing it. I trained for 5.5 years to be a lawyer. I then prosecuted for the police for a few years. Look, if I had a brain problem, I wouldn't try and excavate my brain myself. I'd go and see a neurologist who will be able to help. If I got a bad tooth, I probably wouldn't pull it out myself. I'd go and see a dentist. We need to trust the people who know what they're doing. And I don't know what Richard does for a living, and I'm sure whatever it was, he was retired, he was very good at it. But he's outside his comfort zone. And what this case illustrates, it highlights the fact that this is a very complex and involved field, and you should take advice from people who know, and don't be guided by anecdotal advice from someone who was fortunate enough to be acquitted for a reason that I'm not familiar with.
I feel like he has just got set on this course of this was wrong at the beginning and I'm going to prove it. But unfortunately, that has cost him very dear, hasn't it?
It's cost him very dear, and he's not had anyone sensible, in my view, and I say this with respect, to try and put before him, look, you might argue this point, but these cameras are approved. We need some very cogent evidence to demonstrate that they weren't working. And what's interesting is he really doesn't have a clue how fast he was going. So you've then got the cameras, you've got an engineer to look at them, or whatever the qualifications were, to try and disprove that these cameras are working. Well, you imagine the ramifications if a court was to say, well, yeah, we're happy that these GATSO cameras, for example, aren't working correctly. That would have huge ramifications, wouldn't it, for all other people convicted of speeding. So. And these cameras are tested very regularly. I'm not saying that we fight cases and we win a massive amount. But you have to look at every case on its own merits. And as I say, he's walked in the dark, and he shouldn't have done that. And I'm sure he's learned his lesson. I do feel very sorry for him. But the lesson is, get some advice from somebody who is qualified. Do not embark upon this journey on your own, because it's foolhardy and you will get hurt en route.
Would you have told him to pay the 100 quid?
No, I would have gone through the options with him. I would have looked at the case. I mean, first of all, he might have been offered a speed awareness course. I don't know. If he was offered a speed awareness course, without question, I would say, take that. Then I would say to him, look, you've got a clean license.
Because then you don't get points.
You get no points, and apart from one or two insurance companies, it doesn't adversely affect your premium. I then say to him, look, you've got 3 points and £100 fine. Okay, you want to pursue this technical point. I don't think it's going to succeed. Or I would say, let's get an expert to look at it very quickly to see what the prospects are. So you pay for the expert report. It's not going to cost you a great deal of money. The report comes back, and I say, I actually don't fancy it. I think you're wasting your money. You've got a clean license. Just take it and learn. You need to observe your speed more carefully in future. You don't want to be encouraging clients to fight cases and for them to spend money, whatever amount of money, and for them to lose. If you're going to fight it, you want to win. Otherwise, your reputation is going to be in tatters and they're going to feel totally dissatisfied.
Yeah.
And as I say, unfortunately, he has got himself to blame here.
And you're going to be broke. Well, you won't be broke, but he will be.
But the amount of money involved, I really just don't understand it, because I have never heard of an amount approaching that. We deal with all sorts of people of all sorts of means, and they are quoted a fixed fee on the case, and as I say, it's stratospherically high, it's ridiculous, and of course it will impact adversely on the rest of his life, unfortunately. But as I say, it was his choice, he made his choice, and he made the wrong choice, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Nick. Some really good lessons there, some really good advice there. Get the right advice is what Nick Freeman says. Specialist speeding lawyer from Freeman and Co. And make sure that you know what you're doing before you start pursuing it and you end up thousands and thousands of pounds down. It sounds like Mr. Keedwell didn't do that in the first place, and that